A man sits in a room made of unpolished stone, the air smelling of crushed gallnuts and soot. The missing letter is not an oversight. It is a prerequisite. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is ALEPH, and ALEPH is entirely silent. It is a noise so loud you cannot hear yourself scream. But the text says, God is not in the wind. An earthquake strikes the peak. The ground violently bucks. Massive fissures open in the stone. The vibration throws the prophet to his knees. But God is not in the earthquake. A fire sweeps across the ridge. It consumes the dry brush in an instant. The intense heat blisters the skin. It is the same terrifying fire that fell on the altar days ago. But God is not in the fire. The elements scream. The mountain weaponizes itself. The sheer volume is exactly what a tired prophet expects from the warrior God of Israel. It is the noise of absolute dominance. It is the sound of a deity who crushes his enemies. But then, the fire burns out. The ground settles. The wind dies down completely. The violent noise is instantly swallowed by the vast, empty desert, and what steps into that sudden, terrifying vacuum completely redefines the power of the silent first letter. 1 Kings chapter 19. Verse 12 gives us one of the most famous and most misunderstood descriptions of the divine in all of Scripture. The English translations usually render what happens after the fire as a still small voice, or perhaps a gentle whisper. It has no sound of its own. You cannot pronounce it. If you try to speak an aleph without attaching a vowel to it, we picture a grandfatherly God leaning in close to murmur something comforting into the prophet's ear to make him feel better. But the original Hebrew text does not say, God whispered. The phrase the author uses to describe what Elijah hears is the Hebrew kol damama daka. Kuol means voice or sound. Daka means thin, sheer, or crushed fine, like the texture of chalky dust rubbing between your thumb and forefinger. And the center word, the noun damama, means a dead silence. Its root is the verb damam, which means to be completely still, to become dumbstruck, or to be brought to absolute quiet. It appears in Psalm 107. When sailors are trapped in a deadly hurricane and cry out to God. And the text says, He hushed the storm to a demama, a dead, glassy calm. It is the exact root used in Leviticus when a catastrophic tragedy strikes Aaron's family, and he is so paralyzed by shock that he physically cannot speak. It is a silence that carries immense physical weight. So, a literal translation of what Elijah encounters on the ledge is not a gentle whisper. It is a voice of thin silence. That linguistic combination changes everything. The prophet is standing on the jagged cliff face, his ears likely ringing violently from the sonic destruction. All you are doing is opening your throat and exhaling. It is the faint rush of air in the back of the mouth before a syllable is formed, of the rock and the roar of the fire. And suddenly he is hit by a wall of absolute, suffocating quiet. It is a silence so profound that it actually has a frequency. It is the silent breath of the ALEPH, returning to the mountain. The voice of God at Horeb is not a quiet noise. It is the sheer, crushing weight of stillness. God is showing a broken, exhausted prophet that true power does not have to scream to prove it exists. Elijah thought the mission was over because the noise of the culture was too loud, because the queen's threats were deafening, and because the spectacular fire he called down on Mount Carmel had not instantly changed the nation's heart. He assumed God's authority was measured in decibels and earthquakes. But God strips away the elemental chaos to reveal the anchor of reality. The damama is not an absence of volume. It is a presence that makes volume completely irrelevant. When Elijah hears this thick, vibrating silence, the text says he immediately pulls his heavy woolen cloak completely over his face. He did not cover his face for the wind, or the earthquake, or the blazing fire. It is breath. You can feel it in your chest. A quiet expansion of the lungs before the vocal cords ever vibrate. But the silence terrifies him, because the silence is the unmediated presence of the eternal. And this ancient strategy of divine quiet is exactly what confronts us in the middle of our own loud, chaotic centuries. You wake up in the dark. The room is quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then, you reach for the glowing glass. The blue light hits your retinas. The timeline floods your mind. A war breaks out on one continent. A political scandal erupts on another. The market trembles. The notifications buzz violently against your palm. The noise of the modern world is completely unrelenting. You step outside. Traffic roars. Sirens wail. Arguments bleed out of screens and radios. The cultural airwaves are choked with screaming voices. Each one desperate to prove it matters. Each one terrified of being ignored. It is the wind tearing the mountains apart. It is the earthquake fracturing the stone. It is the fire consuming the dry brush. And you stand in the middle of it. Exhausted. Your chest stays tight. Your jaw is permanently clenched. You drag yourself into your own dark cave. Wrap a heavy cloak of isolation around your shoulders, and wait for God to shout back. When your life falls apart, you want a dramatic intervention. You want the sky to literally split open. We are a species obsessed with noise. We equate speaking with power, and volume with authority. If a medical diagnosis comes back positive, or a marriage fractures, or a career collapses, you want the volume of God to match the volume of your panic. You beg for the thunder. You pray for the earthquake. You demand the sonic boom. Because if God would just yell, you would know exactly what to do. If he would just drown out the anxiety with a megaphone, the terror would stop. You expect him to act like a storm. You expect him to outshout the chaos. But God is not in the frantic noise. He is not competing with the digital static. The silence of God in your darkest season is not an abandonment. It is a recalibration. When he stops speaking in the wind, when he refuses to answer through the earthquake, he is stripping away your addiction to the spectacular. He is forcing you to stop looking for him in the adrenaline spikes. We measure spiritual health by emotional fireworks. We think a silent sky means an empty throne, but the Damama is waiting, the sheer, crushing weight of stillness. This thin silence requires you to stop running. It requires you to step to the edge of the ledge, pull the fabric over your face, and physically feel the heavy, unmovable reality of a God who does not need to scream to prove he is in the room. He does not shout because he is not fighting for control. He does not panic because he already knows the end. We think silence is what happens when nothing is going on. We think silence is an absence. But in the ancient Hebrew mind, the screaming volume of our world is a symptom of its deep insecurity. The silence of the ALEPH is the proof of his absolute sovereignty. But there is one final place this silent breath appears, and it happens on a Friday afternoon, outside a city wall, when the breath of God is violently, physically taken away. A heavy iron spike grinds against the grain of a rough wooden beam. The sky over Jerusalem turns a violent, unnatural black in the middle of the afternoon. The air smells of copper, sweat, and the sharp tang of cheap sour wine. The hill of Golgotha is crowded, but the focus of the universe narrows down to the chest cavity of one man, slowly suffocating on a Roman cross. Crucifixion is not primarily a death by bleeding. It is a death by asphyxiation. The victim's arms are stretched wide, pulling the ribcage into a permanently expanded position. The lungs fill with air, but the muscles physically cannot contract to push the air back out, to take a single breath, to exhale a single syllable. The man has to push his entire body weight up against the nail driven through his feet. He has to drag his torn back up the splintered wood, violently forcing his diaphragm to work, just to release the breath. The silence of the ALEPH is not empty. It is heavy. It is the pregnant pause before a king lowers his scepter. The Word made flesh is running out of air. He is the author of life, the one who breathed into the dust of Eden. And he is now fighting for a single gasp of oxygen. The book of Revelation calls him the Alpha and the Omega, which in his native Hebrew translates directly to the Aleph and the Tav. He is the first letter and the last. He is the silent, pregnant breath of the prime mover. And on the cross, the ALEPH is being violently silenced. Every time Jesus speaks from the wood, every time he forgives a thief, every time he provides for his mother, every time he screams out to his Father, he is enduring unimaginable physical agony just to gather enough breath to form the words. The ALEPH requires a glottal stop. It requires pressure in the throat. It requires the lungs to function. The creator of the alphabet is letting the creation crush his lungs. Finally, John chapter 19 tells us that Jesus says, "It is finished." But the next sentence is the detail that connects the hill of Calvary all the way back to the dark void of Genesis. The text does not simply say he died. It says, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. The Greek word for spirit is pneuma. In Hebrew, it is ruach. Both words mean breath. He exhales his final breath. He voluntarily releases the ALEPH. The vocal cords go completely still. The chest collapses entirely. And the heavy, terrifying silence of the Dimama falls over the hill. It is the stillness of the dark water just before the wind strikes it. Most people think God's first act in the Bible is speaking. The earth violently quakes in response, tearing the rocks apart. But the body on the cross makes no sound. The temple veil tears down the middle. But the mouth of God is completely closed. The silence of the tomb is not a failure. It is the necessary pause before a new creation. The Sabbath begins, and the Maker of the universe rests in the dark quiet of a stone grave. But the story of the silent letter does not end in the cold rock. A scribe skips the first letter of the alphabet, and the silent inhale becomes the engine of creation. A mountain burns black with thick smoke, and the unpronounceable ALEPH of God's identity drops 1,000,000 freed slaves to their knees. A broken prophet hides from a shattered cliff face, and a voice of dead, crushing stillness pulls him back to the ledge. A modern mind drowns in a frantic digital earthquake, and the refusal of God to shout recalibrates our absolute terror. The author of the universe suffocates on a Roman cross, and the ultimate ALEPH pushes against an iron spike just to form a syllable. The Word made flesh bows his bleeding head, and the breath of life is voluntarily surrendered to the dark. We read the English translation, and we hear a booming, deafening voice commanding light to shatter the darkness. We imagine noise. A massive stone seals the Maker in absolute quiet, and the terrifying silence of the tomb becomes the womb of an entirely new cosmos. Same breath, same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the glottal stop. The physical dam holding back the air. The image of the horned ox. The absolute prime mover of the universe. Choosing to completely close his mouth. He holds the silence. The quiet of the ALEPH is not an empty void. It is a presence so massive it makes volume completely irrelevant. If you are in a season where the sky feels brutally quiet, and you are exhausted from begging God to answer you in the earthquake, you might be misunderstanding the stillness. He is not ignoring you. He is not absent. The Dimama is an invitation. You are waiting for a shout to prove you are safe. But the ox is already standing in the room, and may the God who does not need to scream to prove his sovereignty sit with you in your own quiet cave and let you feel the heavy, beautiful weight of his breath. If this opened something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted by the... We imagine the absolute volume of a deity ordering galaxies into existence. But the Hebrew text hides a secret in its silence, noise, and waiting for God to speak. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. He unrolls a heavy sheet of scraped animal skin, smoothing the curled edges with the palm of his hand. Creation does not begin with a shout. It begins with an inhale. To find out why, you have to step away from the parchment. You have to leave the scribe in his quiet room and walk into a desert that is completely devoid of life. Because thousands of years after creation, God is going to speak to an entire nation at once. He is going to reintroduce himself, and to do it, he is going to finally bypass the second letter and use the first. To understand what is waiting in that desert, you first have to understand how the ancient Hebrew mind viewed the alphabet itself. In the original script, there are no vowels. Every letter on the parchment is a consonant. The text is essentially a skeleton of black ink, and the reader has to supply the vowels from memory. You have to physically breathe life into the text to make it speak. But the ALEPH is unique, even among the consonants. Its pictograph in the most ancient Proto-Hebrew was the head of a horned ox. It represents strength, leadership, the prime mover, the undisputed force at the front of the yoke. You would expect the letter of the ox to be a guttural roar. You would expect a hard, explosive syllable that forces the lips open and demands immediate attention. But it makes no sound at all. He dips a reed pen into dark ink. He is about to write the very first word of the Torah. The strongest symbol in the language requires the reader to completely close their mouth, constrict their airway, and wait. If you ask a linguist, they will tell you the ALEPH acts as a glottal stop. It is the physical sensation of the vocal folds, pressing together tightly to stop the flow of air, building immense pressure in the throat, before releasing it abruptly. Try saying the word, uh-oh. That hard catch in your throat right in the middle, that physical barrier holding back the air, that is the ALEPH. It is not an empty space. It is a dam holding back an ocean of breath. The ancient rabbis pointed out that the second letter, bet, means house. It is closed on 3 sides and open on one, facing forward into the text. God used the bet to build the house of the universe in Genesis. He spoke existence into being with a letter that builds walls and defines spaces. But a house without breath is just a tomb. We are terrified of this kind of silence today. If you are driving alone and your stereo cuts out, your hand immediately reaches for the dial to fill the void. If a conversation at a dinner table stops for more than 4 seconds, someone will nervously clear their throat or force a laugh. We use noise as a shield. He draws a shape. The word is Bereshit, in the beginning, but the letter he presses into the parchment to start this epic saga of creation. The airwaves of our lives are saturated with a constant, deafening static, because true silence forces us to face our own vulnerability. When a room goes completely quiet, your senses heighten. You hear the blood pumping in your own ears. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the removal of distractions. In the Hebrew worldview, God's ultimate authority is not demonstrated by outshouting the chaos. It is demonstrated by his ability to hold the silence before the word is spoken. God knew that to deliver the most important message in human history, he could not compete with the noise of Egypt. He could not just add his voice to a crowded pantheon of screaming deities and crackling whips. He had to take 1 million people into a geographical vacuum. He saved the silent ox for a mountain made of rock and sand. And when the time finally came to speak that first letter out loud, the people who heard it almost died from the sheer weight of what came through the air. Millions of men, women, and children stand at the base of Mount Sinai. The granite beneath their sandals shakes violently. Thick black smoke pours from the peak like a furnace. Lightning fractures the heavy cloud cover. Is not the first letter of his alphabet. It is Bet, the second letter. Every ancient scribe who copies this text feels the anomaly. A trumpet blast sounds from the sky. A shofar note that does not fade, but grows louder and louder until it presses against their ribs. The sensory overload is absolute. The air smells of ozone and crushed rock. The vibration travels up through the ground and rattles their teeth. The darkness clinging to the mountain is so thick, it feels like a physical weight on the skin. This is not a peaceful sanctuary. It is a cosmic collision. The Israelites have been out of Egypt for exactly 3 months. Water split for them. Plagues fell for them. An ocean tore itself in half for them. Bread appeared like frost on the desert floor for them. But this is different. This is the creator of the universe stepping directly into the earth's atmosphere. The text in Exodus 19 says the people tremble. They break. They cannot handle the proximity of this kind of power. They pull back from the boundary line. Look at Moses and make a desperate plea. Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But do not let God speak to us, or we will die. They expect a voice of pure destruction. They expect a sound that will shatter their bones. Because every god they have ever known, the gods of Egypt, every rabbi who reads it traces the same missing piece. A story about ultimate origins, about the first breath of the cosmos. The gods of the surrounding nations ruled by terror and volume. When a pharaoh enters a room, heralds scream his titles. When an army marches, iron chariots shake the streets. Noise is the currency of ancient authority. The louder the god, the greater the power. So, when the Israelites stand at Sinai, they are waiting for the noise. They are waiting for a God who outshouts the darkness. God descends in fire. The trumpet sounds one final, agonizing blast. Moses steps into the thick cloud. The moment of ultimate revelation arrives. God is about to speak the 10 Commandments. He is about to deliver the moral architecture of the human race. And according to an ancient Hebrew midrash, right before God speaks, the entire world freezes. No bird chirps, no ox lows, no wave crashes, no angel sings. The thunder stops. The lightning holds entirely still in the gray sky. The universe enters a state of absolute, terrifying silence. The cosmos holds its breath. And into that infinite quiet, God opens his mouth. He is about to speak the first word of the law. He is about to give them the very first letter of his direct revelation. And the letter is ALEPH. The scroll of Exodus chapter 20 opens with a sentence that changes the trajectory of human history. Does not begin with the first letter. The alpha is missing from the Genesis. Most people assume this is just a linguistic accident. God speaks to a terrified, newly freed population staring at a smoking peak. And his very first declaration is, "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." The Hebrew word God chooses for "I am here" is anochi. In the biblical language, there are two primary ways to say I or me. The common word is ani, which is short, highly functional, and used in everyday conversation to denote the self. But God does not use ani from the cloud. He uses anochi, a longer, heavier, more profound expression of identity that completely encompasses the speaker's essence and eternal nature. And anochi begins with the letter ALEPH. You can almost trace the dark ink of that silent letter on the parchment, a symbol holding the immense, the heavy breath of the divine before the syllable even forms in the throat. According to rabbinic tradition, when God spoke from the mountain, the sheer unmediated force of his voice was so overwhelming that the Israelites' souls actually left their bodies. They could not handle the physical frequency of the divine entering the material world. The sages teach a fascinating concept about this exact second in history. They say the people did not hear the entire first commandment. A grammatical coincidence of ancient Hebrew that doesn't mean anything. But if you look closer at the architecture of the language itself, they did not even hear the entire first word. All they actually heard before they collapsed in terror was the ALEPH. If picturing this ancient silence shifting how you read these familiar stories is stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the massive, vibrating silence of God's inhale covers the desert, and it is enough to shatter them. The first communication at Sinai was not a list of rules. It was the crushing weight of his presence. They heard the silent breath of the ALEPH, the undeniable reality of the ox, and they begged Moses to make it stop. They asked for a mediator because the raw, unfiltered presence of the Creator is fatal to fragile, broken creatures. But God knows humanity cannot survive forever if they are completely separated from his voice by a barrier of fear. If the silence of the ox breaks bones, he has to find another way to use the ALEPH. And centuries later, he will use it again on this exact same mountain. For a man who is actively running for his life at the moment, God actually introduces himself to an entire nation. You start to see something the grammatical reading completely misses. A man runs across the desert. His sandals are worn thin. His throat is entirely dry. He walks for 40 days and 40 nights through barren wasteland. He drags himself up the jagged granite slopes of Mount Horeb. This is Sinai. It is the exact same mountain where the trumpet blasted centuries ago. But the prophet Elijah does not want a revelation. He wants to disappear. He has just defeated 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. He called down fire from the sky. He ended a 3-year drought. But one angry queen sends a single death threat, and the great prophet shatters. He finds a dark crack in the rock. He crawls inside the cave. The stone floor is freezing against his skin. The air smells of stagnant dust and heavy isolation. He wraps his heavy cloak around his face. He prepares to die. He is not looking for a new mission. He is looking for a grave. But God calls him out of the darkness. He tells Elijah to stand on the edge of the cliff. The Lord is about to pass by. The prophet steps out onto the ledge. And the sensory assault begins. A great and powerful wind tears the mountains apart. The gale force is so violent, it literally shatters boulders into dust. The howling sound is completely deafening.